Sometimes you can save yourself a lot of time and tape and money by learning how to cut in properly with a paintbrush. So if you watch that segment, that's great. That's what I do. I almost never have to use painter's tape unless I'm using it for a really specific purpose. Sometimes you need a hard line in the middle of the wall. You might need to draw some stripes to underline something. People do all kinds of different decorative finishes at home. And so depending on what you're going for, if you want to have a nice, clean, hard line, or if you need to do it multiple times, then you're going to want to use painter's tape. So I use frog tape. This is kind of one of my preferred ones, but you can really use any brand. Most people are familiar with blue painter's tape at this point. But you should take into account the texture of your wall. If it's a really rough wall, there's a tape for that. If it's a really delicate, smooth wall, there's a tape for that. So make sure you check out that section of the hardware store when you're going to buy. So before I go and put my line down for where I want to have a nice, crisp, clean line, I'm always going to use a pencil and a straight edge of some kind, a level, to draw exactly what I want. And then I will cover that line with paint. We don't want to depend on the tape being straight to stretch between 2 points, because that can wave, and any tension on any kind of painter's tape is going to get you kind of a skewed line. So let's get set up on here and tape out a line. Okay, so let's say that we're going to use some painter's tape to make some really hard lines. Say you're making a wall that's going to have stripes on it, and you definitely want to use painter's tape for something like that. If you're cutting in trim or above a corner, you don't necessarily always need it, but sometimes it can be a really great tool. So let's use frog tape, but you can also find blue painter's tape. And all of these are formulated to clamp down as soon as the paint reacts with the chemistry that's on the tape. As soon as that reacts with the adhesive, it really does make a barrier. So what I've done here, and I always recommend doing this, is I've drawn a line in pencil first, because as much as we like to think that this tape is a super, super straight line, it is flexible, and if you pull it one way or the other too much, you're going to see that it's going to make not a straight line for you. So I'm going to come right up to the edge of my pencil line. I don't cover my pencil line because I want to cover that pencil line with paint. So I'm going to paint on this part of it. Tear off my tape there. And so this is a really important thing that a lot of people don't know about or forget. If you want a really, really good tight line at your tape, even with painter tape, you should always burnish that surface. And so burnish just means that you're rubbing it down so that it's really solid to your surface. Every surface has some kind of texture, and you want to make sure that this is really down there. I'm using my finger, but you can of course use a tool. I'll often use an empty cardboard core of a roll of tape to burnish my materials down. And so if I'm painting on one side of the tape line, I'm going to dip my brush just like before. I just need to get the edges of my paint in there. It's good to get a decent amount of paint on your bristles to save you time, but you see I don't need to drop my whole brush into the paint bucket. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing I do even when I am painting with tape. I'm going to try to deposit the majority of my paint next to the tape, and then I'm going to approach the tape line, and there's different ways you can do this, but if you want it to be really clean, you can start from the tape and come over. And whenever I'm doing this type of painting, I'm always going to feather out my bristles, and make sure you're giving yourself enough space so that if you are using a paint roller after, that you have room away from the tape to come in and do that. And then, you want to blend out so you don't get this hard, heavy, saturated paint area. So I'm going to leave it like this, and then when I come with my paint roller afterwards, it'll blend really naturally. And we can wait for this to dry, but let's see. Perfect line. I definitely recommend waiting for your paint to dry all the way. before you pull your tape. Saves you a lot of mess.